Hey, stories of the soul fame. We've got a swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in and tell us. The club's lights were the kind that softened edges and sharpened sins. Velvet draped the walls like nightfall. The air smelled of perfume and old money. Kate had expected the worst when she pushed through the heavy door somewhere on the other side. His rage and reproach. So what she found instead felt like an odd kind of refuge. A stage. A circle of patrons, the stage manager's glare, and the hum of a room that sold illusion by the hour.
Oh, get out of here while you're still in one piece.
A bouncer had growled when she first slipped in, clutching her cheap sandals. She had no plan. Running had been instinct, not strategy. Her dress was wrong for this place. Her shoes a scandal. She moved like a small animal looking for a nest. She smelled of rain and desperation. You either pay up or earn your keep, the MC announced later with the cruel showmanship of someone used to owning the night. Kate had learned to listen to those words the way sailors listen to cliffs. They meant the difference between standing and drowning. This is for performers only, someone insisted. We don't take refugees. She was a runaway bride who had fallen into the wrong luck, and, for a while, nothing worse than being laughed at. Then a set began, and the stage swallowed her up because, in a room that needed spectacle, she fit a part they were willing to make. The fallen belle, the runaway with the eyes that cried but didn't plead. When she stepped into the light and the music found its bones inside her, the room changed shape. Eyes leaned forward like they'd found a book they wanted to burn and read in the same breath. A chair scraping back from a VIP table made an audible sound of approval. Somewhere a hand counted bills. She moved because the body does what the heart cannot. It keeps breathing. He saw her then, through the flares and the cigarette smoke, a man in a suit that cost 3 months' wages and a reputation to match. Mr. Myers, the richest man in a city that worshipped its own ruin, had the look of someone accustomed to buying what he wanted and disposing of the inconvenient consequences. He called to the manager with the economy of a man who believed roads should clear for his steps. "You're the best thing I've ever seen," he murmured, when later he brought her into the velvet-lit VIP, where the world outside could be made to stop. The lights dimmed again. Their faces were half-sculpted by shadow. The applause that had once been for her performance faded into a hush that felt like a contract. Kate barked a laugh like someone startled awake. "I'm not going to be anyone's trophy," she said. She had said those words a dozen times to herself over the past 10 hours. She had run away because the house she was supposed to step into would have been an elegant cage-fine china, clicking clocks, and a man who measured love in calendars and expenses. Her, the man who'd been pantomimed grief at the altar, was a believer in appearances and investments, not in the messy business of hearts. Mr. Myers, whom the papers called cold-blooded when he had the good fortune to be featured and hero, when it suited a charity gala, smiled in a way that removed any doubt that he thought he could by the narrative. "I'll pay any price," he told the club manager, oblivious to the rawness behind Kate's eyes. "Name it." The manager, who had seen the city's rich trade in human curiosities for sport, read the room and nodded. Kate found herself swept away like a prop. "We'll rent you for the weekend," Myers said. "Play the part. I'll introduce you as my at a charity ball. People understand." He used terms like rent and weekend, as if humans had shipping labels. The truth of coin and contract stung, but this was not the first time Kate had been reduced to numbers. Her life before all this had been a ledger of debts, of kindness never returned, of laughter withheld, of a family that taught her to be small so others could be enormous. She accepted the new arrangement because it was simple. Survive tonight, and maybe tomorrow, things would seem less bleak. She did not belong to him. He believed she did. The estate was an old-world cathedral to taste tapestries that knew secrets, glass that reflected 100 staged smiles. The weekend was supposed to be a public spectacle, a manufactured romance to soothe gossip, to keep eyes from noticing his other necessities. For Kate, it was another stage. For him, the awkwardness of having to pretend at tenderness cut into his carefully curated armor. On the first night, Mr. Myers played the role of a wounded gentleman, stiff, showmanlike, rehearsed. He asked her to drink, to smile, to sit like someone who belonged at his side by inheritance rather than by negotiation. The guests circled and appraised. A man who could buy a stadium of applause could never buy the one thing he most wanted: a life that felt uncontrived. Kate performed because survival had taught her how to rehearse pain. Yet, when the music slowed, and she felt the intimacy of eyes not wanting to just devour, but to understand, something dangerous uncurled in him, an embarrassingly human vulnerability. "You dance like a dream," he said to her once, not as a command, but a confession. "You move honesty into what should be both shame and celebration." Kate wanted to spit. She had been bought, rented, and used to patch an ugly rumor. She had been asked to wear someone's grief in marriage and smile for photographs. Yet under that fierce, brittle indignation, there was a tender ache that caught on him like a hook. "You should leave," she told him one night in the older private corridor that smelled of old roses and older lies. The words were a shield and a plea. He rounded on her with a softness that should have been impossible from a man whose hands had always been white and clean from signing papers. "You have no right to run from me," he said, not as a question, but as a carved truth he'd believed his whole life. "I can promise you that you will never get away." She looked at him and saw, for the first time, the child that had learned to measure himself in clauses and credit someone who had stockpiled adoration like an insurance policy. He believed that possession equaled feeling, that acquiring could replace affection. He did not understand that affection must be earned, not purchased. "You want me to be your bride for show?" Kate asked, pulling free of the performance for a heartbeat. "Then you will discover a truth that no amount of money can smooth. I am not your property. I've been bought before, by survival, by necessity, and I will not allow the same transaction now." He listened as if trying to catalog a new type of pain. The mansion hummed around them, but inside Kate's chest, a different drum began to sound, a daring beat she had learned on a stage, where the only rules were the ones the night allowed. Suspense crept into their arrangement like a slow leak. It began when a man from the club her worst fear realized appeared at the estate's heavy front doors, eyes hungry for leverage. Rumors traveled fast in the city. The right rumor could exact a price higher than any currency. The scandal that had whispered around for months was not about her only. Mr. Meyer's own life had fissures. He owed favors. He had enemies who kept lit torches for his missteps. And his reputation teetered on the edge of a well-deliberated disaster. "You can be mine for as long as I need you," he told Kate in a voice that had traded its final softness for a hard-edged plea. "Play the part at the gala. I will pay. You will be safe. People will believe the story. Safety purchased is not safety kept," Kate said. "And safety bought is still a cage." He hesitated, and in that small fissure something unpinned inside him. He had learned all his life to construct facades that could be propped by public opinion. He hadn't learned how to stand in the open. Watching her, he realized he was not responding to a woman who could be ordered to smile. He was responding to a person who held the spine that refused to break, who refused to be owned by fear. It frightened him. They moved through the weekend like two actors on edges that gleamed with something more than script. There were moments when he would catch her laughing at something not meant for eyes. And for the briefest time, his hands would fumble, as if he had to learn to touch rather than to take. He offered her small mercies. A room with an open window, a book he thought she might like, and candor that felt like contrition. She, in turn, found herself softening at the edges. Something about the way he knelt once not to buy, but to apologize, was a crack that let light in. He admitted to mistakes, such as being only halfway honest with the currency. He told her the pressure he lived under, how the city expected him to be a certain kind of man, how people loved him for his fortune, not his truth. It was a confession dressed in rare vulnerability. Yet the city was an animal that fed on spectacle. At the gala, when the room filled with gossip and cameras, Kate's old life and his old defenses collided. A rival known for theatrical cruelty attempted to expose the arrangement by planting evidence of payment to court clerk, by habit looking for threads to tug. The attempt backfired spectacularly. The rival staged a confrontation on the terrace, one intended to humiliate, but instead the drama revealed something more human. Mr. Myers chose to stand before the crowd not as the man of control, but as one who had chosen to be honest. He called her forward with a simple, startling phrase, "Look me in the eyes." For once, the theater of money and power withdrew and left two people in the harsh light. He told the room a truth that was dangerous because it was naked, that he had tried to buy a lie to save his reputation, and in the attempt, he had learned the cost of a purchased life. He admitted to inviting Kate to be his as a means to a publicity end. But then surprise, a small revolution, he said he wanted more. Not the staged wedding, not the headlines, but to know her, to be accountable to her. It was terrifying. The crowd watched, mouths slack with the luxury of secondhand scandal. Kate's chest roiled with betrayal, yes, but tempered by something else. The sight of a man dismantling the only armor he had ever known in front of people who only wanted spectacle. "You can walk away," he told her then, his voice cracking, not from a rehearsed speech, but from a raw place. "I will not force you. I will not buy you. I will ask for your hand, not as currency, but as choice." That night, behind the curtains and away from the laughter, they argued with the intensity of two people who had learned to survive differently. He asked for trust. She asked for respect. There were no treaties, no easy contracts that could form into a marriage. He had to learn to be trusted. She had to learn to allow the possibility of being loved without being leased. The suspense that had threaded through their weekend didn't vanish because they spoke honestly. There were consequences. The rival tried to dig up dark histories. Someone threatened legal action, and the city never shrank from its appetite for drama. But the version of the end that mattered arrived quieter than the tabloids expected. It came in small, steady things. Him showing up unannounced with coffee at dawn, or telling him a piece of her childhood she hadn't told anyone. Him asking instead of ordering. He began to repair not by grand gestures, but by the grit of daily decisions. On a gray morning when the rain hammered the estate like someone impatient, he walked into the room with a ring he had not purchased to make a point, but had picked because the jeweler had recommended the way. Its cut-through light, something that made it seem like it had been carved from a star, knelt like a man offering himself, not a man buying an ending. "Will you marry me?" he asked, this time without cameras watching. The question hung fragile and true. Kate looked at him, the man who had tried to purchase her life into an arrangement, who had then dismantled the arsenal to stand before her human and ashamed. She had learned how to demand a different kind of life. She had learned how to withhold a yes until it was earned, not leased. "You have to promise something," she said finally. And she set the terms as clearly as a contract. Honesty, not a pretense of sameness. Partnership, not ownership. It's the possibility to leave if the truth ever became a ledger again. He met her terms like a man who had been schooled in making deals, but who now wanted to make something that mattered. He agreed. "I promise," he said, and for once the word was neither a purchase nor a shield, but a beginning. Their love did not become a fairy tale. It remained at times clumsy and fragile. They fought like people who had been hurt by different worldviews. They learned how to apologize, how to share shame without killing the other. The city continued to whisper, but the whispers could not unravel the thing they built when they chose each other, not as purchase, but as partner. Kate Estance stopped being a spectacle and became a memory that bound them like a scar. Beautiful, painful, and real. Mr. Myers, now Michael, to those close enough to call him by his name, learned that the luxury he longed for most was someone who would hold him because of who he was, not for what he could buy. And Kate learned that love could be tender without being traded. When the tabloids finally tired of their tale, and when the city found new rumors to chew on, they were left with the quieter work of living. It was messy and sometimes terrifying, but it was theirs. And Kate kept dancing not to the rhythm of a club's lights, but to the pulse of a life she had chosen, one made of hard-earned freedom and the soft, stubborn care of someone who would not be owned.